I call Kelvin Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and it's my pleasure to give a contribution in the third reading of the Organised Crime and Anti-Corruption Legislation Bill. And there are a number of parts to this bill. It's a very complex and complicated bill. It's been divided into a number of parts, Mr. Speaker. And the Honourable Phil Goff has covered in some detail our concerns around the practice of facilitation payments, and I'll come to that shortly. But a few of the other areas that I'd just like to touch on that are in this bill, one in particular, Mr. Speaker, is the part around human trafficking. Human trafficking is generally considered or thought of as about people being moved across borders. Often we hear of incidents in Europe where somebody in the United Kingdom, for example, will hear noises in a shipping container. They'll open the shipping container and dozens of people will fall out in various states, many deceased. And that's our general impression of human trafficking, that it's this sort of smuggling of people across borders. This bill, though, makes sure that human trafficking is no longer only subject to people crossing borders. In fact, human trafficking can be internally within countries, and there can be domestic trafficking. And I think that's a big distinction to make, something that is good to clarify, that simply trading people for servitude or slavery is unacceptable, and they don't actually have to cross through or over any border for people to be guilty of human trafficking. This bill also addresses identity offences, because through forgery of documents these days we all know about identity theft and the use of the internet to scam people. This bill also strengthens that. Money laundering as well, Mr. Speaker. There's a part on addressing money laundering and strengthening the laws around that. Previously, there had to be some intent to conceal money to be considered laundering. That intent to conceal has now been removed, and it's just the matter, you don't actually have to have concealed money or hidden money away to be guilty of money laundering. In fact, I remember a story of somebody that I knew who worked, it sounds a bit cloak and dagger, for the FBI, and had uncovered a money laundering scheme in the United States where money was laundered and trafficked and hidden away, but it actually had to be physically moved into the United States. And would you believe that the money was cash was physically held in tyres of the aeroplanes? So there are many ways, many imaginative and creative ways that money can be laundering, but the intent to conceal money is no longer an issue. And laundering of property is no longer part of a crime punishable by 5 years imprisonment. New Zealand, the sharing of DNA for the purposes of criminal investigation, New Zealand has improved our international cooperation around that, around the sharing of DNA for criminal investigations. The police can also share personal information with their overseas counterparts a lot easier. That, though, is subject to certain safeguards. So the police can't just hand over information willy-nilly about people. There are certain safeguards to make sure that personal information is used in the most appropriate way. Mr. Speaker, Phil Goff has spoken at some length about the facilitation payments and the whole issue about when is a bribe not a bribe. And the discussion has been that even a small bribe is just seen as a facilitation payment to help people conduct business overseas. And that can be a bribe as $5, $10, $50, $100 that could help speed the process of business or process of goods through customs or through various border agencies and staff. We oppose that, Mr. Speaker. We believe that it doesn't matter what size the facilitation payment is, a bribe is a bribe, and it needs to be treated as a bribe. But we had the strange situation where we would not allow people, overseas foreign officials, to come here and use facilitation payments in New Zealand, but that we could have New Zealand officials overseas actually using facilitation payments. And that is just not right, Mr. Speaker. We've heard how Transparency International appeared before our Select Committee. They were vehement in their opposition to the use of facilitation payments. We've also heard how the OECD and other reputable organisations do not believe it's necessary to have facilitation payments to conduct business. We've heard how the Serious Fraud Office doesn't believe that facilitation payments are necessary to conduct business. We pride ourselves in New Zealand for being one of the least corrupt countries in the world. In fact, we've often held the #1 position in the world for being the least corrupt country. That, though, Mr. Speaker, is starting to slip. Our reputation has been tarnished, and it's tarnished when we have incidences like ministers of the Crown, for all intents and purposes, going overseas to conduct their ministerial business, only to hear that while they're overseas, they're actually been dabbling in personal business and in the interests of personal companies. And well, there are photos of a certain minister in the office of her husband's company overseas, Mr. Speaker. And the other, Mr. Speaker, when they say a dangerous allegation, all I'm alleging is that the minister was there doing ministerial business, and I ask you to defy the. I ask you to defy this, Anthony.
You're not asking me to do anything. I suggest you carry on.
She was there to do ministerial business and instead had taken quite a long diversion to the airport to the offices where her husband works, Mr. Speaker. And that's the sort of thing that tarnishes and taints our reputation. That's the sort of thing that taints our reputation. And here we have a minister defending that sort of thing. That sort of behaviour when when a minister is meant to be overseas on government business and is instead taking these big diversions and going around and having photographs taken in another business of her family, Mr. Speaker. Well, Mr. Speaker, this is the point I'm making about our reputation. Our reputation as a country for doing business, it shouldn't be tarnished. We can't have this sort of behaviour. We know what the minister's guidelines, the cabinet manual says about doing this sort of thing. And yet here we have the National Party is pretty touchy when we raise these issues and these concerns. Well, I challenge the minister to show me the part in the cabinet manual where it says it's okay. Well, show me the part in the cabinet manual that says it's okay. I bet you can't. This is the point, Mr. Speaker. Our reputation is being tarnished because of those sorts of behaviours of ministers. And here we have ministers defending other ministers for behaviour that we know was inappropriate. And I ask the question, why is that minister no longer a member of cabinet? Nothing to say. So, Mr. Speaker, if there's nothing to hide, if there's nothing inappropriate about what occurred, why is that minister no longer a minister? So, Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party supports this bill in the third reading, despite how touchy they are about certain issues that have happened in their own party. We do have concerns about the facilitation payments. We believe that there's no need for facilitation payments to be made to expedite business, and that's something...
Order! There's one member has the floor. Well, I'm sick of a number of things, but we're going to finish. We're going to hear the end of Mr. Davis's speech.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Speaker.
And we're just there now.
Basically,
so
I can't help the way the Minister's feeling in defence of her colleague, but we do support this bill, although we do have reservations around the facilitation payment. Kia ora.
Mr. Speaker.